A paralyzed poor girl only had $3 for her birthday, until the single dad next table walked over. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. We can't afford a cake this year." The rain hammered down on the thin glass of the apartment window like 1,000 desperate fists, relentless and wild. Alara watched the gray sheets of water blur the world outside, each drop a tiny mirror reflecting the hollow ache that had settled deep within her bones, a cold and constant companion. She was 24 today, a milestone that felt less like a celebration and more like a quiet indictment of a life stalled. The biting cold of the room seemed to seep through her threadbare blanket, a physical manifestation of the poverty that clung to them like the damp city fog. Her wheelchair, a standard-issue model with worn armrests and a squeak in the left wheel that she had long since stopped noticing, was positioned by the window, her quiet sentinel in a world that had continued to move on without her. Her brother, Leo, just 7 years old, sat on the floor, his small face a portrait of innocent disappointment. His bright, hopeful eyes, so much like their mother's, were fixed on her. They were the reason she kept breathing. He was everything. The words she had just spoken echoed in the sterile silence of their small living space, a room that held the ghosts of their parents and the weight of their current struggle. The air was thick with unspoken grief and the scent of old books and fading paint. A sob caught in her throat, a raw and brittle thing, but she swallowed it down, refusing to let him see her shatter. For him, she had to be unwavering. She had to be a fortress. She forced a gentle smile, the effort of which felt like lifting a mountain. "But you know what we can do?" she said, her voice a soft, steady murmur against the pounding rain. "I have $3 whole saved. My birthday money. We can go to the little cafe down the street, and I can get a hot coffee to warm my hands, and you can have a hot chocolate. It'll be our special birthday party." Leo's expression shifted. The profound sadness of a child denied a simple joy slowly replaced by a flicker of excitement. A hot chocolate was a rare and sacred treat. He nodded, his dark curls bouncing, and the sight of it sent a tender pang through Alara's chest. It was a small victory, a tiny spark of light in an overwhelming darkness, but it was enough. For now it had to be. She was gone. The journey to the cafe was a familiar battle against a city not built for her. The uneven pavement jolted her chair, each crack in the sidewalk a jarring reminder of her body's limitations. The relentless rain soaked the thin fabric of her coat, and the wind was a biting, cruel thing that whipped her hair across her pale face. Yet, she pushed on, her hands, chapped and cold, gripping the wheels with a quiet, dignified resolve. Leo walked beside her, holding a small, tattered umbrella over her head as best he could, his small body a fierce and loyal shield against the storm. He was her little guardian, her reason. When they finally reached the warmth of the daily grind, the golden glow from its windows felt like a sanctuary. The scent of roasted coffee beans and melting sugar was a welcome assault on the senses, a stark contrast to the damp chill of their apartment. It was a humble place, with mismatched wooden chairs and the soft hush of quiet conversation. They found a small table in the corner, a little alcove of peace where they could watch the rain and pretend, just for an hour, that they belonged to this world of simple, affordable comforts. She had her $3. Across the small room, a man sat alone with his daughter. He looked weary, the way people do when they are carrying an unbearable weight. His clothes were simple, a worn tweed jacket that had seen better days, and his face was etched with a profound, haunted sadness. His eyes, a deep and stormy gray, were fixed on nothing, lost in some distant, private sorrow. The little girl beside him, no older than Leo, was a mirror of his grief. She sat perfectly still, clutching a small, well-loved teddy bear with one button eye and frayed ears. She did not speak. She did not smile. She just held her bear, a fragile anchor in a silent sea of pain. Alara's heart, already so heavy, felt a pang of connection, a shared understanding of loss that needed no words. She knew that kind of silence. She lived in it. Then the little girl's hand faltered. The teddy bear, her small totem of comfort, slipped from her grasp and fell to the floor with a soft, muffled thud. It rolled under a nearby table where a woman in an impeccable suit was typing furiously on a sleek laptop. The woman glanced down, her face contorted in a mask of annoyance, and with a flick of her polished shoe, she kicked the worn toy away. It landed in a small puddle of melted rainwater near the doorway, its soft fur immediately soaking up the grime. A sharp gasp escaped the little girl's lips. Her father, Alistair, jolted from his reverie, his eyes finally focusing on the scene, a flicker of raw pain crossing his features. He froze. Alara felt a surge of something hot and protective. The casual cruelty of the woman, the shattered look on the little girl's face. It was a microcosm of the world's indifference, an injustice she could not let stand. A moment of internal hesitation gripped her. The thought of maneuvering her chair through the cramped cafe, of drawing attention to herself, of facing the scorn of strangers, was a daunting one. The fear was a familiar, biting cold. But then she looked at the little girl, whose lower lip had begun to tremble, and her own pain, her own struggles seemed to vanish. Her quiet resolve took over. This was not a choice. It was a necessity. With steady hands, she began to navigate the narrow space between tables. The squeak of her wheel was loud in the soft hush of the cafe, and she felt the prickle of eyes on her back, but she kept her gaze fixed on the small, discarded bear. She reached the puddle, her heart pounding a steady rhythm against her ribs. Leaning down was an awkward, difficult movement, a strain on her back and shoulders, but she managed it, her fingers closing around the damp, cold fur of the toy. She lifted it, cradling it in her lap as she wheeled herself back toward her table. From her worn purse, she pulled a clean, neatly folded handkerchief, one of the few nice things she owned, a small square of embroidered linen that had belonged to her mother. Gently, with a tenderness that was second nature to her, she began to clean the bear, wiping the dirt from its fur, drying it as best she could. She straightened its little red bow. When the bear was presentable again, she made her way to the man and his daughter. The journey of 10 feet felt like a mile. As she approached, the man, Alistair, looked up, his stormy eyes filled with a kind of stunned surprise. The little girl, Lily, stared at Alara, her own eyes wide and glistening with unshed tears. Alara offered a small, sincere smile. "I think you dropped this," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. She held out the clean, dry bear. Lily's small hands reached out, her fingers brushing against Alara's as she took the toy, clutching it to her chest as if it were the most precious thing in the world. A tiny, unspoken thank you shimmered in her gaze. As Alara started to turn away, she saw Lily's eyes drift to the glass display case, where a single, perfect-looking cupcake with pink frosting and a cherry on top sat on a small plate. It was a beacon of childhood sweetness in the dim cafe. Alara knew, with a certainty that resonated deep in her soul, what she had to do. The $3 in her pocket, her birthday money, felt heavy with purpose. It was never meant for her coffee. She wheeled herself to the counter. "Excuse me," she said to the barista. "Could I please have that cupcake?" The pink 1-inch, she pushed the 3 crumpled $1 bills across the polished counter. They were all she had. The barista placed the cupcake on a small plate and handed it to her. Alara carried it back to the table, her movements careful and deliberate. She placed it in front of the little girl. "I think this belongs to you, too," she said, her smile genuine and warm. Lily looked from the cupcake to Alara, then to her father, her eyes wide with disbelief. Alistair just stared, his face a mask of profound, raw emotion. It was as if he were seeing color for the first time after a lifetime of gray. He seemed to be struggling for words, his throat working but no sound emerging. "Please," Alara said gently to the little girl. "Happy birthday from me." She didn't know why she said it. It just felt right. A small, miraculous thing happened then. The corner of Lily's mouth tilted upward in the faintest whisper of a smile. It was a fragile, fleeting thing, but it was there. She looked at her father, who nodded slowly, his own eyes now glistening with an undeniable moisture. He finally found his voice, though it was thick and cracked. "Thank you," he said, the words heavy with a meaning that went far beyond a simple cupcake. We. How can I repay you? Alara simply shook her head. There's no need, she said. Just enjoy the moment without another word. She turned her chair and guided it back to her own table, where Leo was waiting patiently. She didn't look back. She didn't see the way Alistair watched her, his gaze unwavering, as if he were trying to memorize every detail of her face. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this small, selfless act, had just sent a seismic shockwave through his shattered world, cracking the ice that had encased his heart for years. He looked down at the small receipt the barista had given Alara, which had fluttered to the floor by his table. He picked it up. He was a man with a new, undeniable purpose. Alara and Leo left the cafe a few minutes later, their own mission accomplished, their party over. The rain had softened to a gentle drizzle, and the world seemed a little less harsh. Alara felt a quiet warmth in her chest, a feeling that had nothing to do with the cafe's heating and everything to do with the ghost of a smile on a little girl's face. The $3 were gone, and she had no coffee, but she felt richer than she had in a very long time. The feeling, however, was brutally short-lived. As they rounded the corner to their drab apartment building, she saw it. A piece of paper, stark white against the dark, weathered wood of their apartment door. It was taped there, flapping slightly in the damp breeze. Her heart thudded in her chest, a slow, heavy beat of dread. She knew what it was before she even read the crisp, impersonal type. An eviction notice. The words were cold and clinical, a sterile litany of missed payments and legal threats, signed by their landlady, Mrs. Gable, a woman whose heart seemed to be made of polished marble. The notice gave them 72 hours. 3 days to vacate the only home Leo had ever known. The warmth from the cafe vanished, replaced by an icy, paralyzing fear that was far more biting than the winter wind. The world tilted on its axis. The small hope she had managed to cultivate was ruthlessly extinguished, leaving behind only the ashes of despair. She leaned her head against the cold metal frame of her wheelchair, the weight of it all suddenly unbearable. Total silence. Meanwhile, in a cavernous office at the top of a gleaming skyscraper that pierced the city's heavy fog, Alistair Vance sat behind a massive mahogany desk. The worn tweed jacket was gone, replaced by an impeccable, custom-tailored suit. The haunted, weary man from the cafe had vanished, and in his place was a commanding figure of immense power and wealth. The sterile silence of his office was broken only by the soft click of his fingers on a keyboard. On the polished surface of his desk lay a single, crumpled receipt from the daily grind. He had already dispatched his best private investigator, a man renowned for his ability to find anyone, anywhere. The instructions were simple. Find the woman in the wheelchair. Find her, learn everything about her, but do not, under any circumstances, let her know she was being watched. A quiet obsession had taken root in Alistair's soul. Her selfless kindness, the pure, uncalculated generosity of a person who clearly had nothing, had been a lightning strike to his dormant heart. In a world that was transactional and cold, a world where he had become cynical and withdrawn after his wife's death, this woman was an anomaly. She was a sign. She was a reason. The search was surprisingly swift. By nightfall, he had a complete file on his desk. Alara Maeve, 24. Orphaned at 19 after a car accident that also claimed her ability to walk. Sole guardian of her 7-year-old brother, Leo. A struggling artist, selling small sketches online for pennies. And, at the top of the file, highlighted in red, was a copy of the eviction notice. A cold fury, sharp and righteous, coursed through him. The world had been relentlessly cruel to this gentle, dignified woman. He decided, in that moment, that the world was about to change. His grief had made him passive. Her kindness had reawakened the lion. The next morning, as Alara was desperately trying to figure out how to pack their few meager belongings, a plain white envelope slid under their door. There was no sound, no footstep, just the soft whisper of paper on the worn floorboards. Leo, ever curious, scrambled to pick it up. "What is it?" he asked, handing it to her. Alara's hands were trembling as she opened it. Inside was a thick stack of crisp, new $100 bills. enough to cover 3 months' rent, with plenty left over for food and utilities. There was no note, no explanation, just a single typewritten line on a small slip of paper. From a friend, Alara stared at the money, her mind reeling in disbelief. It felt like a dream, a cruel trick of her desperate imagination. She counted it twice, then a third time. It was real. A sob, not of despair this time, but of profound, cathartic relief, escaped her lips. She hugged Leo tightly, burying her face in his hair, the tears she had held back for so long finally falling freely. It was a miracle. She had no idea who this anonymous savior could be, but she sent a silent, heartfelt prayer of thanks out into the universe. She immediately went to pay the back rent. Mrs. Gable accepted the payment with a sour, suspicious glare, her thin lips pressed into a line of disapproval. She had clearly been looking forward to seeing them go. The immediate threat was gone, but the mystery of its disappearance remained, a quiet hum of wonder in Alara's mind. The miracles did not stop there. 2 days later, a delivery truck pulled up outside their building. 2 men carried a large, sleek box up to their apartment. Inside was a state-of-the-art, custom-built wheelchair. It was lightweight, made of gleaming titanium, with an ergonomic design and a memory foam cushion that felt like a cloud. It was a world away from her clunky, squeaking old chair. Attached was a gift card from a well-known charitable foundation that specialized in mobility aids. The card explained that she had been selected as a recipient from an anonymous nomination. Alara was stunned. She transferred into the new chair, and the ease of movement, the lack of strain on her shoulders, was a revelation. It was like being given a piece of her freedom back. A week after that, another delivery arrived. This time, it was a massive flat pack of professional-grade art supplies. Canvases of all sizes, a beautiful wooden easel, sets of acrylic and oil paints in every color imaginable, and brushes with soft, fine bristles. For an artist who had been making do with cheap sketch pads and half-used pencils, it was a treasure trove. The attached note was simple. The world needs to see your art. Alara felt a renewed sense of purpose. With these tools, she could truly create. She began to paint with a fervor she hadn't felt since before the accident, pouring all her pain, her hope, and her quiet gratitude onto the canvas. Her small apartment began to fill with vibrant, emotional works of art. The heavy fog of her despair was lifting, replaced by the golden glow of possibility. She still didn't know who was behind these incredible gifts, but she felt as if a guardian angel was watching over her, quietly mending the broken pieces of her life. She was not alone. Alistair watched from a distance, his heart swelling with a strange and unfamiliar warmth. He received daily reports from his investigator, complete with discreet photographs of Alara painting by her window, of Leo laughing as he played with a new set of toys that had mysteriously appeared on their doorstep. He saw the tension leave her shoulders, the haunted look in her eyes soften. He was healing her piece by piece from the shadows. But it wasn't enough. He wanted to see her again, to speak with her, to exist in the same space as her quiet strength. He craved the connection he had felt in that brief, sacred moment in the cafe. He learned from the reports that she often took her brother to a small, quiet park a few blocks from their apartment on sunny afternoons. So he arranged a chance encounter. He dressed in his ordinary clothes, the worn tweed jacket and simple trousers, becoming once again the grieving man from the cafe. He took Lily, who had been speaking more lately, even humming to herself, the cupcake having seemingly unlocked a small door in her sorrow. They sat on a park bench, Alistair pretending to read a book, his heart pounding with an adolescent nervousness that felt both foreign and exhilarating. Soon he saw her. Alara was wheeling herself along the path, the new chair gliding effortlessly over the pavement. Leo was chasing pigeons nearby. The afternoon sun cast an amber hue over the scene, catching in her dark hair and illuminating the gentle, peaceful expression on her face. She was sketching in a new pad, her focus absolute. He took a deep breath. He stood up. He walked over to her, Lily holding his hand. "Excuse me," he said, his voice softer than he intended. Alara looked up from her sketchbook, and her eyes widened in recognition. A soft blush colored her pale cheeks. "It's you," she whispered. "From the cafe?" "Yes," Alistair said, a small smile touching his lips. "I never got to thank you properly. My name is Alistair, and this is Lily," he gestured to his daughter. Lily, instead of hiding behind his leg as she usually did, stepped forward and held out the teddy bear. "Thank you for saving Barnaby," she said in a small, clear voice. Alara's smile was radiant. "You are very welcome, Lily. Barnaby is a very handsome bear." They began to talk, the conversation easy and natural. They spoke of the weather, of Leo's love for pigeons, of Alara's art. Alistair felt the layers of his own grief and cynicism peeling away with every word she spoke. He was utterly captivated by her grace, her intelligence, and the unwavering kindness that shone from her like a beacon. He asked if he could see her again, perhaps for a cup of coffee. His treat this time. She hesitated for a moment, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, but then she nodded. "I'd like that," she said. It was the beginning. Their coffee dates became a regular occurrence. They met in the same humble cafe, a place that now felt sacred to both of them. They talked for hours, their conversations weaving a tapestry of shared experience. They discovered a profound connection, a bond forged in the crucible of loss. One rainy afternoon, sitting in their usual corner booth, the cafe warm and quiet around them, the confession scene unfolded. The air was thick with unspoken truths. Alara, feeling a level of trust she hadn't felt with anyone in years, began to share her story. She spoke of the night of the accident, the squeal of tires on wet pavement, the shattering of glass. She described waking up in a hospital, the sterile silence broken by a doctor's gentle, devastating words. Her voice was steady, but her hands, resting on the table, were clenched tightly. She spoke of losing her parents in an instant, of becoming Leo's sole guardian overnight, of the crushing weight of responsibility and the physical pain that was a constant reminder of all she had lost. She did not cry. Her dignity was a shield, but her eyes glistened with the raw, unshed tears of 5 years of suffering. Alistair listened, his gaze unwavering and full of a deep, tender empathy. He didn't offer empty platitudes or hollow reassurances. He simply listened, truly listened, making her feel seen in a way that was more healing than any words could be. He reached across the table and placed his hand gently over hers. A simple gesture of connection, profound anchor. Then it was his turn. He took a deep breath, the sound shuddering slightly. He told her about his wife, Eleanor, about their whirlwind romance and the deep, all-encompassing love they had shared. He spoke of her sudden illness, a cruel and swift disease that had stolen her from him and Lily in a matter of months. His voice cracked as he described the hollow, cavernous silence of their stately mansion after she was gone, the way her laughter still echoed in rooms that were now filled with shadows. He confessed his deepest fear, that his grief had built a wall around his heart, a wall so thick that he was failing his own daughter, unable to connect with her, unable to pull her out of the shell of sorrow she had retreated into. "That day in the cafe," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "when you bought her that cupcake, it was the first time I'd seen even a hint of a smile on her face since her mother died. You didn't just give her a treat, Alara. You gave me a flicker of hope. You showed me that goodness still existed in the world. You woke me up." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and sacred. They were two shattered souls who had found in each other a mirror for their own pain, and in that reflection, the beginnings of a way to heal. The bond between them, forged over shared grief, was now something deeper, something undeniable. But neither of them knew that their newfound peace was about to be violently threatened. Mrs. Gable, the landlady, was a woman who fed on the misery of others. Alara's sudden ability to pay her rent, followed by the mysterious deliveries of expensive items, had filled her with a venomous suspicion. She couldn't stand to see someone she considered a charity case find a foothold of stability. She was a foil to Alara's goodness, a personification of petty cruelty and elitism. She spent weeks poring over the building's bylaws, searching for a loophole, a reason to expel the source of her irritation. She finally found one. A vaguely worded clause about undisclosed sources of income, and maintaining the character of the building. It was flimsy, but she knew she could make it stick, especially against someone with no resources to fight back. She decided to make a public spectacle of it. She waited until a Tuesday afternoon, a time when the lobby was usually busy with residents coming and going. She banged on Alara's door, her fist hammering against the wood. When Alara opened it, Mrs. Gable pushed past her, her face a mask of triumphant cruelty. "Pack your things," she hissed, her voice loud enough to carry down the hall. "You're out. I'm having you evicted for violating the terms of your lease." Alara was stunned. "What are you talking about? I've paid the rent." "With what money?" Mrs. Gable sneered. "We both know you're a beggar. I will not have this building's reputation sullied by your situation." Before Alara could respond, Mrs. Gable began grabbing their few belongings. A box of Leo's toys, a stack of Alara's sketches, a framed photo of their parents, and throwing them out into the lobby. The sound of the picture frame shattering on the polished marble floor echoed like a gunshot. The public humiliation was immediate and intense. Residents stopped to stare, some with pity, others with the same cold judgment as Mrs. Gable. Leo began to cry, clinging to Alara's wheelchair, his small body trembling. Alara felt a wave of nausea. She was exposed, vulnerable, her poverty and her disability laid bare for all to see. Her face was pale, but she held her head high, her dignity a fragile shield against the onslaught of cruelty. She remained dignified, but she was visibly overwhelmed, her spirit starting to splinter under the force of the attack. "You do not belong here," Mrs. Gable spat, her voice dripping with venom. "You are a burden, and I am removing you." She reached for a beautiful, vibrant painting Alara had just finished, her masterpiece. Just as her fingers were about to touch the canvas, a calm, commanding voice cut through the horrible scene. "That's enough." The lobby fell into a sudden, heavy silence. Alistair Vance stood in the building's entrance. He was not the weary, simply dressed man from the cafe. He was dressed in a crisp, dark suit that spoke of immense wealth and power. His presence was so commanding that the air itself seemed to shift, charged with a new authority. He walked calmly through the scattered belongings on the floor, his eyes fixed on Alara. He knelt beside her wheelchair, ignoring everyone else in the room. His voice was gentle, a stark contrast to the venom that had just filled the space. "Are you all right?" he asked, his eyes full of a raw, protective fire. Alara could only nod, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. He gently wiped it away with his thumb. Then he stood up, turning to face a now flustered Mrs. Gable. His demeanor changed instantly. The warmth vanished, replaced by an icy, formidable calm. "I asked you a question," Mrs. Gable stammered, trying to regain her footing. "Who are you to interfere?" Alistair gave a small, humorless smile. "My name is Alistair Vance," he said, his voice quiet but echoing with power in the silent lobby. "I'm the CEO of Vance Holdings." A gasp rippled through the onlookers. Vance Holdings was one of the largest real estate development firms in the country. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning," he continued, his gaze pinning Mrs. Gable to the spot, "I am also the new owner of this building. Of every building on this block." In fact, Mrs. Gable's face went completely white. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving behind a pasty, shocked pallor. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "This woman," Alistair said, his voice rising with a controlled, righteous anger as he gestured toward Alara, "is the kindest, most decent, and most resilient human being I have ever had the privilege of meeting. Her character is worth more than every brick and stone in this entire city. You, on the other hand, are a disgrace." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Consider this your termination notice. You have 1 hour to clear out your office. Security will escort you from the premises." He then turned his attention back to the residents who were watching, his voice clear and unwavering. "Let me be perfectly clear. Alara Maeve and her brother Leo are to be treated with the utmost respect by everyone in this building. In fact, they will no longer be needing their current apartment. He looked back at Alara, his expression softening once more into one of profound tenderness. Because I've had the penthouse suite prepared for them. They will live here, rent-free. For as long as they wish, the power dynamic had not just been reversed. It had been obliterated. Mrs. Gable stood speechless, utterly humiliated. Alara stared at Alistair, her mind struggling to process the stunning revelation, the grand, heroic salvation. He was her guardian angel. He was the friend. He was everything. The resolution was swift and absolute. Within hours, Alara and Leo were being ushered into the penthouse suite. It was a cavernous, beautiful space, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking panorama of the city skyline. Golden sunlight streamed in, illuminating polished hardwood floors and tasteful, comfortable furniture. It was a world away from the cramped, dim apartment below. But the most incredible part was a room off the main living area. Alistair opened the door to reveal a state-of-the-art art studio. An enormous skylight flooded the room with natural light. There was a top-of-the-line easel, a massive wooden desk for sketching, and shelves stocked with every art supply she could ever dream of. It was a space built for creation, for dreams. It was a testament to the fact that he had not just seen her suffering. He had seen her soul. Later that evening, after Leo was asleep in his new, large bedroom, tucked in amongst soft blankets and a mountain of new toys, Alistair and Alara sat together in the quiet living room. The city lights twinkled below them like a carpet of fallen stars. The sterile silence of her old life was replaced by a soft hush of peace and security. Alistair finally confessed everything. The search, the anonymous gifts, the overwhelming need he felt to protect her and repay the kindness she had shown him and his daughter. "You saved me, Alara," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he no longer tried to hide. "My life was gray. I was just existing, drowning in the past. Your one small act of kindness, giving my daughter your last $3, it was like a flare in the darkness. It reminded me that there was still light in the world. That there were still people like you." He moved closer, taking her hands in his. "I have fallen in love with you," he said, the words simple, sincere, and profound. "I love your strength, your dignity, your unwavering heart. I love you." Alara looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears of disbelief and overwhelming joy. The hope that had been a fragile flicker was now a steady, brilliant flame. "I love you too," she whispered, the words feeling more true than anything she had ever said. He leaned in and kissed her, a tender, cathartic kiss that promised a future free from suffering, a future filled with light, security, and an undeniable, profound love. 1 year later, the golden afternoon sunlight streamed through the large French doors of a stately home, spilling out onto a lush, green garden where the sound of children's laughter echoed in the warm air. Alara sat on the patio, her sketchbook in her lap, but she wasn't drawing. She was watching her family, her life. Leo, now a happy, boisterous 8-year-old, was chasing a giggling lily across the lawn, their joy a beautiful, vibrant thing. Alistair was tending to a rose bush, a look of serene contentment on his face that had completely erased the haunted sadness she had first seen in the cafe. He was no longer a man in hiding from his grief. He was a man who had found his way back to life. Alara herself was transformed. She was now a celebrated artist, her work hanging in prestigious galleries, praised for its raw emotional depth and resilient spirit. Groundbreaking physical therapy, funded by Alistair's foundation, had restored much of the strength in her upper body and had even brought back some sensation in her legs. While her beautiful custom wheelchair was still a part of her, it was no longer a symbol of limitation, but simply a part of her story. Alistair walked over and sat beside her, draping a warm arm around her shoulders. He kissed the top of her head. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. She smiled, a deep and genuine smile that reached her eyes. "About a cupcake," she said. "About a rainy day, a worn-out teddy bear, and $3," he chuckled. A quiet, happy sound. "The best investment I ever made." They sat in comfortable silence, Watching their children play, two once shattered souls made whole by the miraculous, seismic power of a single, selfless act of kindness. Their past suffering was not forgotten, but it had become the foundation upon which they had built an idyllic life of profound, enduring love. This story is a testament to the universal truth that a single act of kindness, no matter how small, can ripple outward with unimaginable force. It is a fable of hope, reminding us that even in the depths of our most desperate hardships, a moment of selfless connection can change everything. Alara's quiet dignity in the face of suffering and Alistair's reawakened heart show us that true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in the courage to offer a piece of ourselves to another without expectation of reward. Her simple gift was not just a cupcake. It was a beacon that guided a lost soul back to shore and, in turn, saved them both. If this story touched your heart and reaffirmed your faith in the goodness of people, we hope you'll carry its message with you. The world can often feel cold and transactional, but as Alara and Alistair's journey shows, the power to create miracles lies within each of us. It lies in the choice to see another's pain, to offer comfort without judgment, and to give freely from the heart, for these are the actions that mend a shattered world. For more soul-stirring tales of love, redemption, and the incredible power of the human spirit, please like, share, and subscribe to Soulful Love Tales. Your support allows us to continue bringing inspiring and heartwarming stories to the world. We'll see you in the next one.